Senator Gary Peters just dropped a warning most Americans don't hear. Closing Coast Guard stations isn't just about budgets. It risks lives, disrupts critical services, and leaves our waterways vulnerable. From oil spills to search and rescue missions, Michigan and the Great Lakes are a case study in what happens when readiness falters, and why national security starts right at home.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Lundy, it's good to see you here today. Congratulations on your nomination, and certainly enjoyed the time we spent in my office. And I understand a number of my colleagues have already raised the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Was a big story in Michigan years ago, 50 years ago, and is one that people continue to remember. And it certainly reminds us of how dangerous Lake Superior can be, and the importance of the Coast Guard's critical prevention. Your search and rescue missions are vitally needed. And as you know, folks in Michigan love the Coast Guard, and you've been to the Coast Guard City there and have made many trips, as we talked about. And I also want to just reiterate, you've addressed this question a few times, but I want to just reiterate the concerns that I have about some permanent closures for Coast Guard units in the Great Lakes. My concern is primarily in Michigan, and we want to make sure that those are there because they provide a critical service. And I know there are going to be some operational adjustments that are going to be announced, but we are going to be anticipating some of those. But if you could talk a little bit about that and how you see the services being provided to Michiganders, particularly given the fact that, as we talked about in my office, you have experiencing record recruitment, which is certainly a hats off to the men and women in the Coast Guard, that folks want to be a part of a great service. But with those extra folks coming in, will that potentially lead to additional support for your facilities in the state of Michigan?
Senator, thank you for your question. And thank you for sharing in our meeting yesterday the letters from your constituents about their strong support for the Coast Guard. I was able to read those last night, and so I appreciate having that direct feedback from your constituents and our neighbors and the communities we live and work in Michigan. And you noted the strong recruiting success, and we have. We recruited more this year than any other time since 1991, and the caliber of those young men and women. We just sponsored a recruit class, Linda Lee, Massachusetts Coast Guard, and I, and the caliber of those young men and women is remarkable, the best I've ever seen.
Right.
You asked about our presence in Michigan going forward. So we took a step several years ago to reduce, because we had such a shortage, reduce our footprint and the operating status of several of those stations. That remains a temporary situation, but we are directed now in force design to assess our operating concept in our entire force structure everywhere the Coast Guard is located. We haven't gotten far into that analysis yet. We owe that recommendation and report to the Secretary, and we're just beginning that work. But an important part of that will be making sure we understand what the concerns of those in the communities and the Senate here and the rest of Congress are in terms of our facilities throughout the United States, especially in Michigan, per your question, Senator.
Great. No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you referencing the letters, which I have brought. Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent that I have these letters are entered into the record talking about concerns about manning at various locations throughout the state of Michigan.
Without objection.
Thank you. In our office meeting, Admiral, we talked about a variety of issues, including some of the visits to facilities in Michigan. And one I would like you to talk a little bit about is the Great Lakes Center for Oil Expertise and the concern about oil spills in the Great Lakes and the fact that we still need to learn a lot more about how we deal with oil in freshwater. There's a lot of knowledge regarding that for saltwater, but freshwater presents a unique set of challenges. And when you think about the Great Lakes providing drinking water to over 40 million people, that's particularly important. Could you share with the committee your takeaways from your visit to that center and how you believe it continues to really be involved in a critical mission?
Senator, thank you for asking, and thanks for the support to create that center and have it be and its work and its mission that it's focused on. I was able to go up there when I was commanding Coast Guard Atlantic area. I went up in January of 2023 to visit the region and then also visit that center of expertise. And I learned the important work that they do there to understand the critical nature of the Great Lakes system, not only from a national security perspective and its northern border, but also what a potential oil spill or other environmental damage, such as invasive species, could create in the Great Lakes. And so the importance of that work informs our understanding of risk and then the ability to prevent activities that could cause that damage and then be ready to successfully respond to it, such as an oil spill.
Wonderful. Mr. Chairman, I have one brief question. May I be allowed to ask it? Admiral, Coast Guard personnel, including those in Michigan, have reported to me about some significant challenges in obtaining housing, particularly in areas of high demand for seasonal and vacation rentals, which we have along our lakes, and that certainly affects their ability to find affordable housing. Just a quick question, what actions do you plan to take to address some of the housing challenges facing Coast Guard personnel, specifically in Michigan and some of our high tourist areas with expensive real estate, but clearly it's a problem in other places around the country?
Thank you, Senator, because housing is critical to the readiness of our families and their ability to be ready to get the mission done. So one of the first things we did was we made sure that the information that feeds into the broader system that all the military services use to calculate our basic allowance for housing is accurate information. And so one of the things the Great Lakes District Commander at the time did several years ago was paid a company to gather that data that was more accurate, and then we could input that into the system so that it could more accurately reflect the outcome and the cost of housing. Another parallel effort is to designate additional critical housing areas that enable personnel, if there's an area where housing isn't available, enable those personnel to have their family, if necessary, in another area and then take advantage of that higher housing allowance for the other area. And then the other area we're looking at is expanded use of government leased housing, where the Coast Guard leases housing and then members come into the area, and rather than spending time and effort trying to find housing where it's not available, we already have a home or apartments or a block of homes that they can live in. But it is a challenge because our personnel don't typically live, with rare exception, on large bases, and there are none in Michigan.
Right. Well, I appreciate your attention to that and your focus. Thank you, Admiral, for that. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
What Senator Gary Peters is highlighting here goes far beyond a local concern in Michigan. It's a snapshot of a nationwide issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention: the critical role of the U.S. Coast Guard in keeping both our waterways and our communities safe, and what happens when that infrastructure is at risk. The Coast Guard isn't just patrolling for safety or enforcing regulations. It's the frontline responder for emergencies, environmental disasters, and threats to national security, from oil spills to search and rescue operations. When you start talking about closures or reductions in staffing, the implications ripple across an entire region and, in some cases, the country. Peters' concern isn't abstract. The Great Lakes provide drinking water to over 40 million people. They are a hub for commerce, recreation, and energy infrastructure. Yet even with this immense responsibility, the Coast Guard faces serious operational challenges. Stations in Michigan, for instance, have had to adjust due to staffing shortages in previous years, which temporarily reduced their footprint. While recruitment numbers are up, the highest since 1991, Peters notes, there's still a limit to how quickly those new personnel can be integrated, trained, and deployed. Infrastructure, housing, and logistical support all have to keep pace with the personnel gains, or the system falters. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Peters also zeroes in on the Great Lakes Center for Oil Expertise, highlighting a critical gap in national preparedness. Most of the Coast Guard's oil spill expertise is tuned to saltwater environments, but freshwater presents unique challenges. A spill in the Great Lakes could have cascading consequences: contamination of drinking water, disruption of local economies, and long-term environmental damage. The center isn't just a research facility, it's an insurance policy for millions of Americans, providing specialized knowledge and response capabilities that protect both human life and the economy. Then there's the housing problem, which might sound like an administrative detail, but is actually central to operational readiness. Coast Guard personnel, like any first responders, need to live close enough to respond immediately. And in areas like Michigan's high-demand lakefront communities, housing costs can be prohibitive. Peters emphasizes that without access to safe, affordable, and reliable housing, recruitment and retention suffer, and so does mission effectiveness. The solutions, updating housing allowances, designating critical housing areas, and leasing government-owned housing, are practical steps, but they underscore the complexity of maintaining a service that is expected to respond to disasters anywhere at any time. Taken together, this discussion reveals a broader lesson about national security and public safety. It isn't only about the visible threats, foreign attacks, terrorism, or extreme weather. It's also about the infrastructure, personnel, and planning that quietly keep our communities safe every single day. Closing stations or failing to provide resources may seem minor on paper, but the consequences are tangible and immediate, from delayed rescues on Lake Superior to compromised response during an environmental emergency. This is why the public must pay attention. Decisions about staffing, base closures, and infrastructure aren't just internal military matters. They directly affect millions of Americans' safety, livelihoods, and access to essential services. Senator Peters is making it clear that Congress, local communities, and the public need to stay engaged, ask questions, and demand accountability before gaps become crises. For viewers of Left Lens, the takeaway is clear. National security and public safety aren't just about what happens overseas. They're about the readiness of those standing guard in our own backyard. Supporting the Coast Guard, understanding its challenges, and holding leaders accountable for funding and policy decisions is part of protecting every American. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and be part of the conversation. Like, share, and subscribe to Left Lens, because understanding these issues is the first step toward ensuring America's safety and security isn't left to chance.